Hey, everybody. Hi, I'm Jacqui Lewis, and I think you know that, but I'm so glad you're here. If I tell you that 3,500 of you, 3,500 of you have signed up for this conversation that we're going to have, I hope that that feels to you like there's something really special happening in the universe and that we're going to do something amazing together. So we're at 1,300. I'm going to give it just another second to come in. I want to let you know that, oh, yay, I'm so glad. I want to let you know that my team and I are thrilled that you signed up for this masterclass. It is part of the ways that we're protesting anti-Black racism is to make sure that we train our colleagues, turn our colleagues into allies, turn our allies into accomplices, so that we can heal the world of racism once and for all. So I'm just going to welcome you, and I'm going to tell you as we gather that this is a two-part series. Tonight is 90 minutes, and tomorrow is 90 minutes. Tomorrow we'll have a special guest. The Reverend John Jenko will join us for a while and talk about what white people need to do. But this is a call for this moment, and we are going to talk over the next 2 days about 5 steps to anti-racism. And I wanted to make sure that you know also that on Friday night, Juneteenth, we're going to keep it moving. So the class is tonight and tomorrow. Juneteenth, we have a beautiful revival style party with artists and dancers, an uprising of art that's called Juneteenth Now, Get Us Free. And that's from 7 to 8:30 as well. On Sunday, we have an amazing worship planned for those of us who do church, and those of us who don't should peek in. Yvette Flender's coming to preach for Pride. In the afternoon, Ruby Sales and I will have a conversation. And then at 7 o'clock, our gospel choir will be in digital concert. So if you want music this weekend, education this weekend, training this weekend, or just a way to hang out with folks who have a yearning for a better world, you have come to the right place. Come to the right place. I am going to sip some water, and we are going to get started. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Vicki. Hi, Joy. We've got community from all over the place gathered here. Okay. Listen for a word from Huffington Post, written by Jacqui Lewis in 2007. In the matter of Black lives. He was walking in his hoodie, carrying Skittles and an iced tea. He was selling cigarettes. He was selling CDs. She was pulled over for changing lanes without signaling. He was pulled over for a broken taillight. He was walking down the stairs because the elevator was broken. He was standing on his front porch. She was sleeping on her grandmother's couch. He was standing with her boyfriend on a corner. He was registering people to vote. He had whistled at a white woman, so they say. He was standing on his front lawn. He was standing on a motel balcony. A man's body is slammed against a car. He's wrestled to the ground, face smashed into pavement. My head hurts, watching, feeling the rub of the asphalt. I've been here before, the familiar. There's a sense of suffocation, hard to breathe, with your face in the concrete. Subdued, they're sitting on him, sitting on me. He is tased, I am tased. I am shot in the chest, in the back. I can't breathe. It's on fire. I'm lying there. I use my hand to reach up and touch the bleeding space. I am dying. They have knelt on my neck. I am dead. He is us. That is our blood oozing out into the pavement, our children weeping as our image is plastered in the media. He is dead. We are dead. Reciting from our graves the names of the all too many killed at the hands of the state, or by those who know the state will exonerate them. A little girl sits in the back seat. Her mother is praying over and over again, "Please, Jesus, don't let them have killed my boyfriend." He is bleeding, slumped over, a pulpy mess where his arm should be. She watches, she listens, and we see what she sees, hear what she hears. There's a policeman holding a gun in the window, pointing at him, who is moaning. Mommy is talking to the phone, making a video. She has to get Mommy's purse. Now we're in the police car. Mommy is crying. She is losing it. I'm afraid, but I think she is more. I tell Mommy, I am right here with you. The man is dead. They killed her childhood. They killed our childhood. They killed us all. And we and our children are screaming and afraid and traumatized. Their blood is in the ground, which is crying out, how long will we wait for freedom? Our dead bodies choking in the dirt, struggling to scream, when will it end? When will our lives matter? When will Black lives matter? We know this hatred is not inherent. We know that we are not born to hate. We learn to hate. It starts with a suspicion that the so-called Negro is inferior, fueling fake science to support the hatred. Biblical myths have fueled the hatred. Cain kills his brother Abel and God is angry. Cain is marked or cursed with dark skin or black skin. Southern Baptists used this so-called curse to justify slavery. Brigham Young, the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, used this so-called curse to argue in 1852 that Blacks could not be priests in that denomination, a ban that was lifted 125 years later. Noah cursed his son Ham, they say, and according to some Jewish, Muslim, and Christian believers, the curse was for his progeny to be slaves. And so it is, condoned by broken theology and now by cultural conscription, that Black lives matter so little in our nation that they can be pummeled, kicked, tossed, stomped, tased, trashed, shot, killed, and discarded with little consequence, with impunity, with hands casually tucked in pockets, as though the people they kill are less than animals. This hatred of Black flesh is so deeply embedded in our culture, it must be addressed for the sickness and sin that it is. What must we do? We must confess that to be silent is to agree, to be complicit, that we have not done enough. This must be whispered in confession booths, must be prayed from pulpits, must be preached in sermons, must be said at coffee houses. We have not done enough. God's creation includes beautiful Black bodies, and when we disregard their lives, we disregard the one who created us all. We mock God, and that is not acceptable. 2, we must create a revolution, a love revolution that acknowledges that each body is awesomely and wonderfully made, no matter what the skin tone is. The revolution is specific. It begins with each relationship, an acknowledgement of particularity, a deep listening of story. We can't be conceptual revolutionaries. We must not be, as my friend Yvette Flunder says, closet prophets. We must know and other and love them and carry them inside of us at all times. Carry them with empathy. 3, we must revise the narrative. The story of white supremacy is a lie, a fake story, a fake story. that must be disrupted on the level of culture, society, and legislation, at the level of system and government. And this must begin at home, at our dinner tables, in our congregations, in our synagogues and mosques, in the yoga studio, at our fellowship hours. Our outrage must create a revised narrative, a new story, a story in which all of God's children are seen and cherished as wonderful, gorgeous, beloved, valued, fabulous, awesome mirrors of the Holy One, even if they don't believe in God. And four, though this work is for all of us, I would be remiss if I didn't say that white people have a special role to play in changing this story. You who have privilege must own it. There is no more time for denial. You who have privilege must teach your children that they have privilege and it comes with responsibility. To open the doors for others, to share power, to step back from power, to learn how to follow Black lives into the trenches, and to be willing to be taught. You must be willing to learn. Read Black history because it's your history. Bring those stories to the classroom, to the boardroom, to the church school room, and to the pulpit. Read your holy text for the stories of people of color. Disrupt the whiteness of Jesus because he was not white. You must tell other white people that they have power, and you must not mince words. You must, because you are truth tellers, tell the truth, because the truth will set us all free. Hatred is coming for us. Hatred has come for us. You know it. You see it. It's coming for immigrants. It's coming for Muslims. It's coming for Jews and Sikhs. It's coming for women. It's coming for gays and lesbians and bisexual and transgender people. It's especially coming for Black transgender women. Hatred is coming for anyone who is other, and it is coming for Black bodies, for Black men, women, and children. And so we who believe in freedom must come to understand that when a Black body is killed, we have all been murdered. When a Black child is hungry, our nation's stomach must growl. When a Black grandmother goes to the polls and can't vote, our rights are being dismantled. When it is done to the least of us, to the most marginalized of us, it is done to us, to each of us, because we are not free until all of us are free. We still have a race problem in America. In the matter of Black lives, we have so much work to do. A preamble. Am I still here? Okay. Did somebody say yes? Yes? That's my family downstairs yelling yes, we're still here. Good. Okay. So guys, I want you to pretend like you're with me here in my bedroom / office. I wish I could see you. I wish I could see you. I wish I could see you, really see you. The shape of your face, the texture of your hair, your eyes shining with hope and sorrow, or like COVID crazy screen red-eyedness. I wish I could see you. But here we are, we're in my room with the fan fanning, and me with my not so tech good self, and my family screaming, you're still good. And we are gonna talk through tonight 3 of these essential steps toward an anti-racist, multicultural, inclusive America, because we're accepting the call of this moment. We're gonna talk through this. I'm gonna talk through, and I wanna encourage you to take notes. To take notes, put your notes in the chat, put notes on a note paper, and tomorrow we're going to do a Q&A. But today I'm going to lay out some story, the frame I work out of for human development, for the development of humankind, for the development of racial identity, race, racism. I work in a narrative frame. Almost all of us know Freud, at least a little bit. We know id, ego, superego. We understand that Freud worked about drives. You can't live in America and not really know a little bit about that. That it was the drive to live, the drive to maintain your life. You know about edible complexes and all of that stuff. But Freud's developmental theories were about a kind of drive to survive, if you will. Some of the people who came along after him had different ways to think about how we became a person. Erik Erikson was a student of Freud's who talked about 8 stages of humanity. Whether you put a child in a jungle or you put a child in Manhattan, they're going to develop into a human being in 8 stages. And in between stages, there'd be conflict and tension to resolve. Will they trust or mistrust? Will they feel coherent or incoherent? This is Erikson. Another set of people who came after Freud are called object relations people. They were saying that human development is about the relationship that the child has with the first caregiver, the mother, the father. The breast, the bottle, was the first object of affection, if you will. Feed me, bring me the milk. And so many of them talked about good enough mothering or good enough parenting, creating a container in which a person grows, a holding environment in which a person grows. I really do subscribe to that sense that we become a person in a good enough container. And in fact, leadership development theorists now talk about a container as a place for adaptive learning. People like Heifetz, people like Kotter, you've read them, I'm sure. We make a container for adaptive learning. That's what happens to a kid. Inside a womb, that's a container. In the mother's arms, the father's arms, that's a container. The playpen is a container. The space between the parent and kindergarten class is a container. That's object relations. And coming behind them is a group of theorists who really talked about narrative, story. We are who we are because of the stories we're told. We become who we become because of the stories that shape us. These stories are stories of, like, birth order is a story, sexuality is a story, gender, race and ethnicity is a story. I'm just going to cough, a really good cough for you. And so these stories that shape us all intersect with each other. To be a Black woman is different than being a white woman, narrated differently. Religion bends the story. These stories refract, bend, and overlap and change each other. And human development is all about getting your story straight, is the simple way to say it. You get your story straight. You understand yourself. You go to therapy. You have a spiritual director. You go up and you have a cohesive, coherent narrative about yourself. I really believe that that's how we get to be a person. At least is a really strong way to understand it. And then I think we understand that the stories that story us, if I can turn that into a verb, the stories that story us are not neutral. They are laden with biases. They are laden with folks' stuff, prejudices, assumptions, some valid and some not. And race is such a story that shapes us, a story that's a lie. So the conversation I'm wanting to have with you, I'm going to have it with you in a kind of an intimate way, a straightforward way, a personal way, like you're in my room with me, is about how do we re-story race? If race is a story, a social construct made up, then I think it's a story that if enough of us aim our love at it, aim our stuff at it, aim our intention at it, aim our wisdom at it, our intelligence at it, our passion at it, then we can change the story. And our Lord says you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. So we need new tools to dismantle the story of race in America. And one of the things that we need to do that is each other. However many of you are on this Zoom webinar now who are white and Black and Latinx, Hispanic and Asian and Indigenous, old and young, straight and queer, you are the ones I've been waiting for to be outraged, to be undone, to be infuriated, to be crazy with grief, so that we are just saying together, we are not going to take it anymore. We are not going to have it anymore. So let's get started with the first part of this. The first part of this talk is restoring race. Being Black in America is a pre-existing condition for poverty, for discrimination, for death. Black Americans are dying of the coronavirus at 3 times the rate of white Americans. While Black people make up 13% of the US population, they account for 26% of the deaths where race is known. The incarceration rate for Black people is 5 times the rate of white people. Both unemployment and poverty rates are twice as high for Blacks as whites. Black wealth is only 1/10 of white wealth, 1/10. 1/10, Jacqui, really? Yes. Wealth being the difference between assets and debt. Average white wealth for a family of 4 is $171,000. Average wealth for a Black family of 4, $17,000. The death rates for Blacks is generally higher than whites for heart disease, for stroke, for cancer, asthma, for flu, pneumonia, diabetes, HIV. Black Americans are 2.5 times as likely as white Americans to be killed by police officers. In 1903, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in the Souls of Black Folk, he wrote, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line." Well, it's 2020, and white supremacy still has its knee on the neck of Black folks, still chokes the life out of Black folks, beats the joy out of Black folks. From my point of view, though there are many reasons that humans discriminate with each other, gender, sexuality, language, socioeconomic status, national origin, religion among them, racism still remains the 21st century problem. It's almost ubiquitous in its ability to do harm. And it's not just Black folks. COVID-19 becomes a Chinese flu. Will you ever forget the image of the older Chinese man with a cart full of stuff and the poor seeming, the disheveled seeming Black people that beat him for his stuff? I mean, I don't know how to call that, trickle across racism. Puerto Ricans are still treated like second-class citizens in this nation. Poor white people are not white. They're not white enough. And SCOTUS finally extended the full protection of human rights to our LGBTQI siblings. And I don't know, my queer friends, was there some silence around that in your point of view? I thought I was gonna see like, woo, celebrations, but I did not see that, and I'm not sure what that means. But anti-Black racism is the festering sore. It is a self-inflicted wound on the psyche and soul of a vulnerable democracy. I want to say that again because I wrote it and I thought, is that what you really mean? Because isn't it a wound on Black people? It is a horrific wound on the souls of Black folks. But I think it's also a wound on the whole psyche of our democracy. I think it's a wound that has inflicted a vulnerable democracy with the onset of chattel slavery, it's a putrid hole in the soul of America that doesn't heal. And it doesn't go away. And so if you're Black in the conversation right now, how traumatized are you? How traumatized are you by the image of George Floyd on the ground with the knee on his neck? The imagined that you can be in your bed sleeping and shot 8 times. Not, I mean, 8 times through the window. The idea of Ahmaud Arbery running and being like cornered like you would a cattle or something, a creature. We're gonna corner you with our car, bump you with our car, hit you with our car, and then shoot you to death. How traumatized were you with the images of Tamir Rice being killed for being a boy with a gun, a toy gun? Folks running away from the police and shot in the back. How devastated are we to watch a probably buzzed, maybe buzzed, out celebrating your daughter's birthday, in the parking lot of the Wendy's, sleeping? How devastated are we to imagine that we live in a culture where the police wouldn't call your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend and say, come get your man, he's buzzed, or put him in a cab. But we get to harass you for 40 minutes and arrest you, and then it goes south, and then you're shot dead, not shot in the leg, not tased, by the way, to stop running. A Black man is being arrested, and he has a knife, and as soon as he drops it, he's 22 rounds of bullets. Like, how traumatized are you? And then all the things that are on television right now, just to remind us of how horrific racism is in America. Did you go back to see Rodney King? Did you see him beaten and stomped upon? This is why I say living while Black in America is a pre-existing condition for discrimination, for poverty, for death. So this year, Juneteenth, we're doing this class today and tomorrow, and our big Juneteenth party, and a big gospel choir concert on the 21st, all in honor of Juneteenth, June 19th. 155 years ago, the last enslaved Africans in the Confederacy were told that they were free 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation had been written. It was the 19th of June, so therefore it's called Juneteenth. There's a fancy word for what happens when you put words together like that. I know it some days, not today. But Black people are not free, not yet. The 13th Amendment didn't get us free, not yet. Loophole. You can't be enslaved, but if you do a little crime, you can be stripped of your rights. When Black incarceration rates decrease, when Black children drink clean water, when Black mortality rates decrease, when Black wealth increases, when Black schools in Black neighborhoods are safe and equipping the geniuses that we're raising, when Black lives matter, when Black lives matter, then and only then will all lives matter. Please, colleagues who are becoming allies, who are becoming accomplices, understand that the phrase Black Lives Matter is a prayer. Because they don't. Not in this nation. They do to me, but not to the state. Not to policies. If you've been reading Ibram Kendi's book, How to Become an Anti-Racist, and I was looking in there for terms to define, and I thought just right now I should say to you that I subscribe to the definition that all of us might have prejudices, but racism is prejudice plus power. Prejudice plus structural power. I have personal power, I really do. I have people who work for me and they sometimes boss me around, and sometimes they let me boss them around, but they respect me as their boss. I have a congregation of 1,300 people. I have influence and have a chance to say things out loud and teach a class like this. That's personal power. But as a Black woman in this nation, I don't have the power to be racist because racist is structural. And Kendi says, you're either racist, which means you are trafficking in systems and structures that are racist, or you're anti-racist, which means you're advocating for policies and principles and structures that are not, and there's nothing in the middle. So by the time we get through with this course, I'm going to be asking you to take the anti-racist pledge, honey. Trust me, I'm coming for you, no matter who you are and no matter where you are in your journey. So again, I'm talking about how we become who we become as a product of the stories that are told to us. The stories that are told to us, about us, around us. And a story doesn't just mean somebody told you the words. Stories are also enacted. This is Howard Gardner's theory in a book called Leading Minds, which is a book you should read, that leaders tell compelling stories that change the story. Leaders tell stories that change the story. So Hitler was a leader, right, who told stories that changed the story. And King is a leader who told stories that changed the story. So also Malcolm X and Medgar Evers and Ruby Sales and Fannie Lou Hamer. Trump is a leader that tells stories to change the story. And again, it's not just what we say, it's what we do. We enact stories, we show the story. So I want to tell you the story of how I became Black. Me. How did I become Black? Conversations about race are not new to me. I was raised by parents who were raised in Jim Crow, Mississippi, the harshness of segregation, poor, raised by single moms. One was a sharecropper, the other one inherited some property and lived on a tree farm. My mom sang in the choir with Fannie Lou Hamer. My Uncle George was one of her best friends, and they went around Sunflower County, Mississippi, registering people to vote at much peril to health and threat. But I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. They like tried to protect us. You know, these people who were raised in Mississippi, who went to the Air Force, who met in Omaha, Nebraska. They tried to protect us. They would spell the word white. Did you know that W-H-I-T-E person, blah, 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 blah. And we were like, we can spell. We know what you're doing. But they wanted, I think, for us to not be children who felt that the racism in America was going to impact us. So I was born into this Black family, this proud Black family, learn Black history along with Bible verses at the dinner table, recite stuff, you know, learn all the things, Black books, all that. But I was baptized into American anti-Black racism, not by my parents, but in kindergarten, when a 5-year-old named Lisa came to disrupt my happy, well-adjusted little life in the Air Force Base, where there were 1.5 Black children in the whole base. Me, I was the full one, but then some girl named, I can't do her name, Karen, I think, who was Japanese and Black, 1.5 of us. And just a happy, well-adjusted little classroom of other white kids. Tommy and Tommy were my two Tommies. Tommy Holly, Tommy Hollister, blonde, red-haired, snaggletooth, freckle face. They were my homies. It was just, we were just friends. We lived close by on the circle in the Air Force Base. They took turns putting my table up on the chair, my chair up on the table. They took turns carrying my lunchbox. Carrying your lunchbox was like a big sign of love and affection when you're in kindergarten. And we were just a happy little menage a trois till Lisa came. Lisa came with her bobbed hair and her greenish brown eyes and her Mississippi ways, and stage whispered to the two Tommies that I was the N-word and she knew where I got chocolate milk from my mama's breast. And it was on. I was Emma and Richard's kid. I was Wanda's sister. There were only two of us at that point. And I was Madeir's grandbaby and Mama Gert's grandbaby. And then I was a nigger. Thank you. So I went home crying and I told my mom and dad about this thing. And my dad took it to the Air Force Base commander and told the story. And the girl's dad had to apologize to dad, and the girl had to apologize to me. I think that was the beginning of my anti-racist activism. It's like, yes. My mom did the other thing. She did this other really beautiful thing where she said, Jacqui, she called me Jack, you will not believe this, but it is just so outrageously stupid, but some people might not like you because you're a Negro. I was a Negro then. That dates me. We'll talk about that later. Some people might not like you because you're Negro. What? She was like, but that's just silly because you are our kid and you are God's kid and you can do and be anything you want. The way my mother cast that for me as not like normative or something to be, she just was, she to a 5-year-old, I thought she was telling me that it was laughable. But I hit my knees that night and my Lord, I laid me down to sleep prayer was also, God, please make it be so that anybody, no matter what color they are, will feel loved. Now that definitely is the beginning of my faith walk in this anti-racist way. So the dad, go tell the base commander and make something happen, and mom's kind of hermeneutic of how foolish is that, which was the right thing to say to somebody my age. I think I shouldn't skip this part of the story. It would make me look nicer if I didn't. But when she called me the N-word, I did sing to her something I'd heard somewhere. White cracker, you don't shine. I bet you $5 I can beat you behind. She raced me. I came right back with something that was someplace inside me. And suddenly, I was a nigger and she was a cracker. Do you feel me? Yeah. My mom did say we shouldn't call people crackers. I got that talk. So there was my behavior and hers all wrapped up in suddenly adult race crazy at 5. I can't tell you though how the kind of indelible mark on my psyche and soul were my parents' belief. I mean, Black, Southern, Mississippi, poor. Where did they get that? They totally believed that they were equal to all the people in the world. And my mom, bless her heart, this, if my siblings were here, they would crack up. Because my mom used to tell us, I'm so bad. She'd say, I'm so bad. I just think you all are better than everybody else's children. It was like her ongoing refrain. You're on the way to church? I just think you're better than all the other children, no matter what color they are. So she was like propping us up, to give us a lot of confidence in ourselves. So this story, How I Became Black, is to prompt you to think about, how did you become white? How did you become Chinese? When did you know you were Dominican? When did you know you were Cherokee? When did you know you were Mexican? Or how did you know? When did you know that you were Jamaican? When did you know that you were a part of a tribe that people call race, but that isn't race? So if we're defining terms, there's only one race, and that's human. What we're really talking about is ethnicity. Ethnicity is, you know, a collective set of traits that belong to a group of people, a selected group of people. We're often talking about culture, Southern culture, you know, Southside Chicago culture, Dominican up in Washington Heights culture. And we know that culture is a collection of, you know, of attributes, music, food, language, that belongs to a certain group of people. But there's no race, there's only one race. The race thing is made up, that's the made up story. But I just want you to take a moment and make a note wherever you're making notes. Because tomorrow we're going to go deep on an exercise about when you knew you were a certain color, a certain race, that somebody thought of you as a race. And how did you find it out? Did your parents tell you? Did your parents say, Tommy, I'm going to do Tommy Holly, Tommy, we Hollies are a sturdy group from Germany. We don't cry, and we don't fraternize with niggers. Is that how you learned? Did you learn because your TTs and your tios and all your family got together and did big cookouts and you learned how to dance and eat the food and make the food? And how did you learn that way? What it meant to be Puerto Rican? So think about that. Just hold that for just a second. How did you find out that there was a thing called race? And did you find out at the same time where you stood in the hierarchy? Did you find out that blacks were on the bottom and whites were on the top? Did you find out that the blacker you were, the less desirable you were, according to the world? That attributes about your blackness would be read onto you? And did you find out that the worst thing in the hierarchy was to be black? And the best thing was to be white. Therefore, you distanced yourself from the black people. Did you do that? Did that happen to you? It happened to some of my friends. Did you get called a black dog by white people? Or a sand nigger because you were Indian? And it was meant to slam your heart. My friend Valerie Kaur will tell you that story. She does in her book, See No Stranger. Did you find out that if you were the poorest, least enfranchised, not having a strong future, economically struggling, only high school degree having, let's say, white person, did you find out that you would make more money than a college-educated black person because America works that way? I'm talking about whiteness now. And I want to distinguish whiteness from like white people, because I happen to think that white people do have ethnicity. I once read an article that said white means never having to say you're ethnic. But before white people were white, they were German, they were Lithuanian, they were Swiss, they were English, they were Scotch. They were mutts, they were English and Scotch. They were Irish. Of course, the Irish were black to the British, because one thing that is true about human nature is we like to have somebody who's beneath us. I say one thing that's true about human nature is we love to have somebody who's beneath us. But they were Irish, and they were British, and they were French, and they were Slavic, all of that before they were white. They had to learn to be white. You lovely white friends in this call learned to be white. If you didn't learn to be white, your great-great-grandmother learned to be white. When she dropped her name, when she got to Ellis Island, when they signed a different document, when they left behind their accent so that they could not be on the margins, and they learned to be white. They passed for white. So there's white, which is also not a race, but it's a collection of ethnicities that have lighter skin that is called white. Also a made up story. And then there's whiteness. Whiteness is a really messed up story. A lot of white people don't have enough whiteness to truly be white. Can I say that again? A lot of white people don't have enough whiteness to be white enough. Tandeka's book, Becoming White. They don't have enough money, they don't have enough power, they don't have enough prestige, they don't have enough houses, they don't have enough wealth. They're not really white. Dave Chappelle, he will tell you more about that. And then some white people have a lot of whiteness. Some white people have so much whiteness, it overflows. It spills out into the world around them. This kind of whiteness is like a cancer. This kind of whiteness is, whiteness like lies, it cheats, it's hypocritical, it's inflexible. It will by any means necessary do what it needs to do to have its way. It will put its knee on the neck of Black people. It will make sure that there are policies that keep Puerto Rico not a state and with poor infrastructure. It will pretend that there's something called trickle-down economy, and it will amass more wealth than it could ever spend in 20 lifetimes. But it will do that because whiteness just wants to have it all. Whiteness is a disease that infects some of us, but affects all of us. Whiteness built this nation. Whiteness left the monarchy. Let's say the monarchies, let's be fair, and got on boats and traveled across the pond and came here and landed on Turtle Island, and blessed by popes and kings, took the land. Encouraged by its own thirst for freedom, impinged the freedom of the people here because they weren't really people, although to be sure, whiteness thought the indigenous people were better than the Negroes, but not good enough to let them keep their stuff. You see what I mean? Whiteness built empires on the backs of other people. Whiteness elected a genital grabbing liar with no morals. Because whiteness was offended that there had been a Black man and a Black woman and 2 Black children in the White House. Whiteness was very outraged at this and felt it was an existential threat to whiteness, because it was. So whiteness got jacked up, did some working out, did some propaganda, organized itself, and elected, you know who, I'm not gonna say his name. We must, all of us, no matter our ethnicity, no matter our race, no matter our class, no matter our gender and sexuality, we must look at whiteness as the enemy that it is. Whiteness is not your friend, and it is certainly not mine. And when it gets close enough to us, it it like sticks itself in us. I have been stuck by whiteness. Whiteness, I, African American, badass person that I am, have been infected with whiteness. I work for the collegiate church. Sorry, colleagues, I work for the collegiate church, which, AKA the Dutch Reformed Church in the city of New York. Yes, Dutch Reformed, as in South Africa, where apartheid was created as a theology to make whiteness godliness. Yeah, those same people, except here in the United States, who came here, took this land in New York, built wealth, built churches on the back of Lenape. There's a slaveholder hanging on the wall on the second floor of our office suite. I'm taking that picture down. I'm just telling you. Whiteness is everywhere. And if I don't confess how it affects me, and I can't be a good teacher. I want us to be the enemy of whiteness. Because whiteness is our enemy. And if someone writes, we're not at war, I'm going to say, yes, we are. We are at war. Look at it, straight on. And I'm not saying we have to be violent because we're at war, but we are in a war of ideals, a war of identity. What is this nation going to be like? Who are we going to be? Who are we going to be? What are we going to be like? What are our children? What's it going to be like for my grandbabies, Ophelia and Octavius? Octavius, by the way, named after a freedom fighter in Philadelphia. Look him up. Okay, that's how I became Black. You're thinking about how you became fill in the blanks. You're thinking about whiteness. You're asking yourself, really, Jacqui? Okay, so let me tell you more. Let's talk about the story of race, period. Our story of race, the national story of race. Race, let's talk about it. Race is a story made up, a social construct created by humans to oppress humans, period. Race is a social construct created by humans to oppress humans. Thomas Jefferson helped create the story of race in his little book, The Notes on the State of Virginia. Now, look, I think if there was a statue of Thomas Jefferson in my backyard, I might take it down. I might. Complicated dude, yes. Father of nation, Constitution signer, but check this out. He writes this book, a little book called Notes on the State of Virginia, and he writes it so that he can do like an apologetic, make a case to the people in France about why they would like to come to America and invest in America, and probably help Jefferson kill some Indians, probably. So on the one hand, Jefferson's work is critical of societal mores of the time. Historian William Payton writes, quote, in the Notes on Virginia, Jefferson at one time or another criticizes most of the vested interests of his time. He attacks the assumptions and usurpation of power by the rich. He criticizes that. Oh, but he's rich, but he criticizes it. The powerful and the well-born. He criticizes the tyranny of the church, the dogma of the schoolmen, this is a quote, the bigotry of the man on horseback, like I have a horse and you're walking, the enslavement of man by man, the injustice of racial superiority. That is what the historian says about Jefferson. He who had slaves? Okay, and yeah, okay. On the other hand, Jefferson, he's really clear about how he feels about the Africans. Now, this is a long quote, but I want you to like listen to it. Just really listen to what Jefferson really thought. You need to know that there was talk of him wanting to liberate slaves, and when he wanted to liberate enslaved Africans, he wanted to send them away from America. He wanted to get them out of here. He didn't think that the whites and the blacks could live together, especially after you've been whipping people and not paying them wages. He thought that that would be uncomfortable for the white landowners to have the slaves in their midst, because the enslaved Africans would probably be angry. But that's not all he thought. Be ready for this. It will probably be asked, why not retain and incorporate the blacks into the state and thus save the expense of supplying by importation white settlers, the vacancies that they will leave? Don't import white settlers to fulfill the vacancies. Deep-rooted prejudices entertained by the whites, 10,000 recollections by the blacks of the injuries that they have sustained, new provocations, the real distinctions which nature has made. That's an important line. The real distinctions that nature has made and many other circumstances will divide us into parties and produce convulsions which will probably never end but in the extermination of the one or the other race. To these objections, which are political, may be added others, which are physical and moral. Physical and moral. The first difference which strikes us is that of color. Whether the black of the Negro resides in the reticular membrane between the skin and the scarf skin, or in the scarf skin itself, whether it proceeds from the color of the blood, the color of the bile, or from some other secretion, the difference is fixed in nature, and it is as real as if its seat and cause were better known to us. And is this difference of no importance? Is it not the foundation of a greater or less share of beauty in the two races? Are not the fine mixtures of red and white the expressions of every passion by greater or less suffusions of color in the one, preferable to that eternal monotony which reigns in the countenances, that immovable veil of black which covers all the emotions of the race? Did you hear what he's saying right there? Isn't it cute when white people blush? And you like, oh, we can see their emotions, but black people are just monotone because they're just one color and they don't blush. Okay, sorry. Add to these flowing hair, a more elegant symmetry of form, their own judgment in favor of the whites, declared by their preference of them, as uniformly as is the preference of the orangutan for the black woman over those of his own species. Do you know what he's saying there? Black people like white people better than themselves, and orangutans like black women. Yes, orangutans like black women. That's what he's saying. The circumstances of superior beauty is thought worthy attention in the propaganda, the circumstance of superior beauty is thought worthy attention in the propagation of our horses, dogs, and other domestic animals. Why not in that of man? Besides those of color, figure, and hair, there are other physical distinctions proving a difference of race. They have less hair on the face and body. They secrete less by the kidneys and more by the glands of the skin, which gives them a very strong and disagreeable odor. Have you ever read this? This greater degree of transpiration renders them more tolerant of heat and less so of cold than the whites. Perhaps, too, a difference of structure in the pulmonary apparatus, which a late ingenious experimentalist has discovered to be the principal regulator of animal heat, may have disabled them from extricating, in the act of inspiration, so much of that fluid from the outer air, or oblige them in expiration to part more of it. They seem to require less sleep. A black, after hard labor all through the day, will be induced by the slightest amusements to sit up till midnight or later, though knowing he must be out the first dawn of the morning. They are at least as brave and more adventuresome, but this may perhaps proceed from a want of forethought, which prevents their seeing danger until it is present. When present, they do not go through it with more coolness or steadiness than the whites. They are more ardent after their female, but love seems with them to be more an eager desire than a tender, delicate mixture of sentiment and sensation. Their griefs are transient. We don't feel things. Those numberless afflictions which render it doubtful whether heaven has given life to us in mercy or in wrath are less felt and sooner forgotten. In general, their existence appears to participate more of sensation than reflection. To this must be ascribed their disposition to sleep when distracted from their diversions and unemployed in labor. An animal whose body is at rest and does not reflect must be disposed to sleep, of course. He thought we were animals. Comparing them by their faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory they're equal to the whites, in reason much inferior. As I think one could scarcely be found capable of tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid, and that in the imagination they are dull, tasteless, and anomalous. It would be unfair to follow them to Africa, though, for this investigation. Just a little bit more. This unfortunate difference of color, perhaps a faculty, is a powerful obstacle to the emancipation of these people. Many of their advocates, while they wish to vindicate the liberty of human nature, are anxious also to preserve its dignity and beauty. Some of these, embarrassed by the question, what further is to be done with them, join themselves in opposition with those who are actuated by sordid avarice only. Among the Romans, emancipation required but one effort. The slave, when made free, might mix without staining the blood of his master. Without staining the blood of his master. But with us, a second is necessary, unknown to history. When freed, he is to be removed beyond the reach of mixture. Let me tell you why I read you this long behind Thomas Jefferson quote. What in the heck? If our nation is built on the promise of democracy, on the premise of democracy, on the insistence on democracy, and the Negro, the Black, the African, is seen as little less than an animal or an animal, how this Constitution isn't for us, this nation isn't for us, this democracy isn't for us. It's not for us. It has never been for us. Never been for me. Never been for me. So when we say the system's broken, I say actually it's doing what it's supposed to do. If built into the fabric of this nation is the reverence of these founding fathers whose attitudes were like this, and we have glamorized them and idealized them and not critiqued them because we don't know them, we are dealing with a system that is fraught with hatred of my kind, me, my people, our color, our inability to blush. We're horny, we don't love people, we don't grieve, we don't feel, we don't think. And when Jefferson wrote all this and exported this to France, fake science sought to justify the president's words. Just like today. The powerful have words that people scamper to justify. The powerful unleash a torrent of hatred and rage on the powerless. And the system perks up and snaps to and does what it's supposed to do. Which is to say that built into the fabric of this democracy is the hatred for Black bodies. Which is to say, built into trainings for police, built into police departments, built into policing, militarying, is the hatred for Black bodies, the disdain for Black bodies. Built into school systems is the hatred for Black bodies. Built into the economy is the disdain for Black bodies, the hatred of Black bodies, the persistent sense that Black bodies are not as good as white bodies, not as strong, not as powerful, not as beautiful, not as smart, not as ardent, not as rosy. You're in my room, right? This makes me cry. This makes me sad. This makes me angry and outraged. And when we see, you know, Rodney King, Breonna Taylor, when we see Sandy Bland, when we see Mike Brown, when we see Trayvon Martin, when we see Eric Garner, when we see the violence, we're like, oh my God. But that kind of racial harm, that kind of disparity, that kind of injury happens every single day of my Black life. Every single day. Left off of important emails, left out of important conversations, absolutely disrespected as a Black female leader, dismissed, codified, disregarded. If I'm passionate, I'm angry. If I'm sharp, I'm a bitch. Yes, I said that. Or I'm fetishized because I'm one of the good ones, right? I'm smart, I'm articulate, I'm clean, just like Obama. Me and Obama, clean and articulate and smart. I'm wanting you to feel how the story of race in America has affected my soul, my life, my siblings, my grandchildren, my cousins, my mama, my dad. And every Black person that you know, every Black person that you know in this nation is traumatized right now. And this is not to say this conversation is only about Black and white. It is not. I started there. This is about all of our ethnicities being clumped and called race. It is about stratification from white to Black everywhere in the globe, not just in America. Let's call the mountain range between Haiti and the Dominican Republic a fascinating story about race and colorism, let's call it. Chinese women buy Black market fade cream to make sure that they're not dark. Wear gloves and hats and umbrellas to make sure they're not dark. I am the darker sister. And I'm saying this story has messed us all up, you and me. So this story begins with a suspicion from Thomas Jefferson, is exported around the globe. Blacks are inferior to whites, to indigenous people. They're more ardent after they're female, that means horny. But love seems with them to be more an eager desire than a tender, delicate mixture of sentiment. Their griefs are transient. An animal whose body is at rest and who does not reflect must be disposed with sleep, of course, because what else can you do? You're not thinking, you're just going to sleep. I told you that narrative psychologists believe that our identity is formed by stories told to us about us. We are formed by these stories in a family of origin, in ancestral history, stories in our culture, history written by white people around the globe, castes, indigenous people, Latinx people, Spanish-speaking people, Asian peoples as inferior and compliant, inferior and malleable. That's what the Asians get stereotyped as. But we are all of us, including poor white people, caught up in a story that is not true, but nonetheless has been devastating to us. So if I say that Howard Gardner says leaders tell compelling stories to change the story, I'm telling you, since it is a story, we can change the story. You're here. It's 11:10 on a Wednesday night and you're zoomed out, yet you are here because you know we can do something about this. You know we can. You know it's our time. You know the time is now. You know we're the ones we've been waiting for. June Jordan, you know what time it is. And we've been silent, we've been quiet, it's not that bad, and we've been closing our eyes and we've been closing our ears because it's just too much and we can't take it. It is too much. It is way too much. And therefore, we are listening and we are activated. And what this is going to require, if we're going to restore race in America, it's going to take all of us to do our part. Every single one of you on this call, every one of you in my earshot, and all the people in your sphere of influence to get in the game of changing the story. I mean, we cannot allow any more racism, anti-Black racism, to kill Black people. We can't allow anti-Chinese racism to have violence against our Chinese siblings, or anti-Muslim sentiment, or anti-Semitism to wreak havoc. We've got to cut it out and find our shared humanity and find our moral courage to speak up and speak out and change the story. And we need tools. We need new tools to dismantle the master's house. We need tools of solidarity. We need tools of training. We need storytelling. We need activism. We need tactics and strategies. And we are going to focus on how to change this story. Because we can articulate a new vision of an America that our children can be proud of, where we don't tolerate each other, but we groove on the fact that we're different. And it excites us and delights us. And we make multi-ethnic communities where we share culture and music and art and water. We have to be brave, though, because the system is entrenched and it does not want to change. Not really. I mean, Congress haggles about an anti-lynching bill, and everybody's for it, except for Rand Paul. I can't for the life of me understand his logic, but he feared that minor injuries might be called lynching and somebody might go to jail that shouldn't go. That's how something in a system will stick its position in the ground and just grind things to a halt and just stop things from happening. We have to be brave. I was on a call earlier today with a bunch of clergy talking about how do we preach at this time. And I don't know if I didn't have time for the prep. So I was cranky when I got questions about, how do we preach the word of God in this time? How do we preach the word of God to everybody in this time? It seemed like the real question was, how do we preach the word of God instead of politics in this time? How do we not offend people in this time? How do we not offend people in this time? Child, it's time to offend people. It's time for the truth to liberate us, for the truth to be incisive and insightful, for it to cut us free of apathy, of hopelessness, of the feeling that we can't do anything about it. The truth has to send us running to the polls to vote in these primaries. The truth has to get us registering all of our neighbors so they can vote. The truth has to get us into the streets if we're safe, not if we're vulnerable, but to use every tool in our bag to disrupt the way civil rights have been rolled back, the way voting rights have been rolled back, the way the economy still rewards rich white people with more wealth to have more wealth, the way we presume that money is going to trickle down, the way we don't have a courageous vision enough to think about changing the way we pay people, changing the way we spend our money, changing the schools that we put our children in. Let's put our children in schools with children who are brown and black so that all of them can learn how to create a new America together. Like, what would happen if we decided that this work is so important to us that we will risk all of it to make it different? We have to be brave. We have to be bold. We can't be tentative, and we have to build a bridge. Over there is somebody who will never come to a class like this. I'm pointing left in my house as opposed to right, but I'm going to change and go right. Over there is somebody who will never come to a class like this, ever come to a class like this. They won't think about coming to a class like this. They'll think maybe there isn't racism, or they'll think if they come to a class like this, they'll say something politically incorrect and they'll be embarrassed. They'll never come. Next to that person on the bridge is somebody who got talked into coming. Then there's somebody who knows that they need to be here, but is really actually still working on their race stuff. And then there's somebody who's like, I've been a freedom fighter. We've got to build a bridge from that somebody who'll never come to the one of us that is fatigued from all the work that they've done. Because our lives depend on this. Sometime after the Rodney King thing, and I don't know what year exactly, maybe 1992 or 3, I cut off my hair and I had like a little afro. I mean, a boy afro. And I looked just like my brother with some lipstick on, you know? If you were behind me, you thought I was boy driving. I can't tell you how many times I got pulled over on the way from, like, on Route 33, on the way from the New Jersey shore where I was living to Princeton, where I was in seminary. It was crazy. Like, followed by cops, nervous with cops. Put your hand on the steering wheel, Jacqui, because they don't know you're a girl yet. And it might not matter. Me, nice me. I've got 4 brothers who move around and live in the world. I don't want any more dead Black people. Do you? So, this workshop is a call, this masterclass is a call to know the story, to get clear about the story, to read deeply into the story, to understand the story of race in America so we can change the story. So we can change the story. So I'm going to stand up because I got to stand up and get 2 books I want to show you. And then I'm going to give you some homework to do. And we'll get ready for tomorrow. Okay? I'm standing up. You can stand up too. I'm back. Okay. So first of all, homework. I read you a bunch of that Jefferson thing. I want you to go and Google Jefferson Notes on Virginia. And I want you to read it. Read as much of it as you can stand. Highlight, ask your Google to highlight the Blacks. But understand that this is a foundational document for white supremacy written by one of the authors of our foundational document. Are you with that? Can you hear me? Can I say that again? It's a foundational document for white supremacy written by one of our founding fathers who wrote our foundational documents. 3/5. My people. So read that. I think Ibram Kendi's book is wild. He's not pulling punches, and I think you should read it. And I understand he has a new book out for anti-racist baby, but read this book. You don't have to read it tonight, but you should buy it. You should order it. This is what I want you to do. This book is a little faithy, so if you're not a faithy person, you might not want to get this, but I think it's an intersectional book. It's called Becoming Like Creoles. And it sets up my theory piece for tomorrow. I'm going to talk about what it means for us to develop what Curtis DeYoung calls a Creole identity, which is a mixed identity, and what I call a border personality. I don't mean borderline, although that might be something that is true for some of us. I mean border. Like, what does it mean to be mestizaje? What does it mean to be mixed? What does it mean to have what W.E.B. Du Bois would have called a double consciousness? What does it mean for us to have a two-ness? Du Bois said African Americans have a two-ness, the ability to have a kind of gaze from their blackness, but also the white gaze, conscious of the white gaze. Black people in America, I think black people around the globe, have to develop the ability to code switch to, I got my home talk, I got my at work talk, I got my at school talk. We move in the world and survive in the world by understanding the white mentality. Do you know what I mean? Like, we understand that. We understand whiteness and its gaze upon us. Du Bois says we took that gaze in, and that is the two consciousnesses, our own consciousness and the white consciousness. That's in his book, The Souls of Black People. Virgilio Elizondo, a Catholic priest, said that in his view, the doubleness of Tex-Mex, being on that border, gave particular gifts to those people, particular cultural gifts. So if Du Bois is saying double consciousness is a gift that black people have, Elizondo is saying mestizaje, being on that cultural border, is a gift Mexican Americans have. And I, in my dissertation, studied leaders who were in multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic congregations. And to a person, they had a gift of double. They had at least a double consciousness. One man I studied was a wealthy, son of a wealthy physician and a stay-home mom. But his mother was his maid, Ruth. His mother's the one who protected him from the storm. His mother is the one who came to school and got him when he was crying or sick. His mother was the one who comforted him and raised him. And he will say, inside him is a black mama. Now, all the white people raised by black women don't say that, but he does. He claims that part of his identity is that there's a black story inside him. There's a black woman's story deeply embedded in his heart because he loves her. And that wired him, What would happen if white Americans developed a double consciousness? What would happen if there was an intention about knowing the story of others so completely, so fully, there would be such empathy, such transformational empathy, that a white man in a boardroom would be sitting there with a black woman's consciousness? Whew. What would happen if doing immigration work together, a Jewish woman and a Mexican woman became such colleagues, so connected through their stories, through their storytelling, through their listening, through their empathy, that they both were transformed by the relationship. So that the Jewish woman was a little bit, Mexican, and the Mexican woman was a little bit Jewish. This is why the system wants us to stay apart, because when we get together, we actually do change. I am not nearly as black as I used to be. I'm black, but I've also been multicultured by my life. I am not as straight as I used to be because I have been queered by my queer friends. My story has been changed in relationship to my husband, to my children. I'm not the same as I was. I'm metamorphosized. I'm sure I said that wrong, but right? It's been a metamorphosis. And you too, when we get close to each other, when we love each other, when we tell each other stories, when we really listen to each other, when we live together, we change each other. And the powers that be don't want that. They separated poor blacks and poor whites by taking all those indentured servants and letting the white ones buy their way out of indenturedness and make the black ones slaves. That's how they disrupted a movement that would have happened to take down white tobacco landowners. They just divided them up and conquered them. But what's really true is that those kids are out on the street protesting with their masks on and sharing hand sanitizer and trying to take care of each other, as is true in every movement where there is a mixing up, a sharing of story and strategy, people change. There becomes one humanity, not pockets of ethnicity. And I want to be crystal clear that I am not saying I want you to lose your Italianness or your Frenchness or your Creoleness, or for me to lose my African American Southside Chicago-ness. I am saying there's a Huber identity that's above our ethnicity. And that identity is human. It just is. So that when George is dying, we're all dying. So that when a baby is hungry in a Chicago slum, our stomachs growl. So that an old Chinese man who's being pummeled because he's Chinese, that our hearts are broken and we know we have to stop the madness. The higher identity is human. And that's the story I want us to write together. So I hope you'll come back tomorrow at 7:00. We're going to do stuff about your story. We're going to do stuff about how we can change the story, some tools and tactics. You'll do Q&A. Tomorrow will be practical stuff based on some of the storytelling we've done today. And I wish you a great night, a good night, a night of rest and sleep, a restoration for your soul. And I'll see you soon. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it's so good to see all those notes. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Natalie. Pamela, hi. Thank you, Kathleen, Jacqueline, Carrie. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Lisa, Jessica, Linda, Dory. Hi, middle people. Love you guys. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Oh, good. See you tomorrow. All right, Jack, Peter, Tammy, Tracy, Jesse, hi. Thank you all for coming. Jem, Suzette. Hey, Jerry Lazor. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, Paul, Andrew, Janie. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Love you too. Thank you, Caitlin. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everyone. Oh, I'm so glad you came.